Hi everyone, Stefano here from SZ channel. Welcome to this new video tutorial. I will show you how to create this kind of satisfying and loopable animation here in Blender. Before we start, let me remind you that you can download this Blender file joining my Patreon page, but even if you are not a patron of mine, I decided to share with everyone this simple material, this rubber rock material that I create just for this tutorial. So be sure to visit my Patreon page. And also, I just uploaded my latest 3D animation on my main YouTube channel. Be sure to watch it and leave a like or a comment. I will really appreciate that. Okay, so let's get started. And here we are in a new Blender scene. I want to start creating the module mesh that I will duplicate and deform it later along my curve. So let's scale this 3 times on the X and Y axis, and I want to scale it halfway on the Z axis. Apply the scale. In edit mode, I want to add some loop cuts in both horizontal and vertical direction, and in face selection mode I will select all my faces and right click to select subdivide, and 4 times will be enough. I need this kind of resolution in this object because this will be deformed along curve later, so we need all these loop cuts in order to have a smooth deformation later. So let's go back to object mode, and we can add Shift A cylinder. Let's increase this default resolution to something higher, like 128. Also, I like to turn on this random option so I have different and clear colors during the working process. I want to scale this cylinder now bigger. Let's apply the scale, right click, shade it smooth, and in the normal option here, let's check this auto smooth box here. Now I can shift select my cube, Ctrl minus to add my first Boolean operation. We can see the modifier here under the modifier stack, and we can directly apply this. We have some normal issues, and this is probably because I forgot to turn on the auto smooth also for my cube object. If I want to add some loop cuts in this part, always to have a smooth deformation later, you can see that it's kind of a mess because there's no continuity in this geometry created by the Boolean operation. So what we can do is in wireframe visualization, I can box select all the faces except this plane here and delete them. We can patiently get rid of a lot of these useless vertices here. This is a boring task, but it will help later, so I will speed up this process. It's just a matter of selecting all these and then press X and dissolve them. Yeah, and this is a little bit better. And what we want to do now is to, in face selection mode, select all of them and then E to extrude on the Z axis. And now the difference between this object and the one that we had before is that if I now press Ctrl R here, you can see that I can add some loop cuts. And to be honest, we should work a little bit even more. We should weld all these double vertices here, but I don't want to spend now too much time on this aspect because this is not the focus of this tutorial. So just always keep in mind that when you are dealing with Boolean operation, you probably will have some kind of topology issues to solve, or at least to try to improve for your work. So let's shade this smooth. And one last thing that I want to do is to delete these side faces. Well, actually not this one, but the one that are on the x-axis, because this will be the axis where we will, along which we will deform this object. So let's delete. We can also add a bevel modifier. And another good side of polishing the topology is that if you later will apply some modifier like this one, like the bevel modifier, you will probably have less problem. Okay, now that we have our basic module object in place, let's add Shift A simple curve object, and I want a circle. So let's rotate 90 degrees on the x-axis and immediately apply its rotation. And then in edit mode we can scale. I can also G and Z to move this up until I have my curve that's aligned with the floor. And I think I will need an open shape, so I have to go here under this active spline and uncheck this cyclic in U. And now I have to rotate again this, pressing Ctrl to have precise increments. Let's scale this on the Z axis and go down here, and let's try also this one. Both of them. Now I have this kind of shape that is more or less what I'm looking for, and I want to have this way bigger, I think. So let's change this option here to the 3D cursor, and now if I scale this, it will stay on place here. That's where I need this point to be. So a little bit more. Okay, so this will be our path, and this will be our object to be modified and deformed along this path. We can continue and we can start adding some modifier. The first one will be an array modifier. So I want to have in the x axis, but I prefer to have on the negative direction, so I insert here -1, and I want to check this merge option. This means that each one of these will be merged together, and this is important because when you will deform along a curve, you won't see some kind of seam between each one of them. And then here you can just increase the number of copies. Probably we want to have the bevel modifier as last one. I think is more right way to do it. And now, of course, the most important modifier is the curve modifier. You can find this under deform curve, and we want to pick as curve object our path. And you can see our object snapped directly to the opposite end of our curve. This is not what I want, but you can fix this very easily, because if you now try to move along the x-axis, let's change back to median point, or also you can just go under the location value here and you can click and slide, and we have our object nicely deformed. Well, not really nicely, you see that's a little bit jagged here, but this is not depending on our deformed mesh. To increase this deformation, we want to go under the curve option here and increase the resolution on the U, and by default is set to 12. We can double this, or even more, 36. And now you can see that's nicely deformed. Okay, for the second part, we want to model the other side of this strip that will be combined into these kind of holes here. So let's create a second collection, and we can move the cylinder that we kept from the first process, so M, and move to this second one, and we can hide the first collection for now. Let's frame this, and I want to have back this object to the texture visualization. So in the same place we can add another cube, can scale this 3 times and then halfway on the z-axis. I apply the scale, and I should have kept a copy also of this cube instead of repeat this process. I didn't think about that, but okay. I remember all the steps. It was 4 times, and here we are. Okay, let's scale this cylinder. I want to have the cylinder more or less this size. Let's apply the scale, and this time we will perform a union Boolean operation, but before that I want to make this object a little bit more rounded, and I don't want to forget that this will also be deformed later along the curve, so I don't want to leave this kind of big n-gons, otherwise they will cause problems later. So let's inset in this case, and I can have some resolution just adding a few loop cuts on these top sides of the cylinder. And we can also add some loop cuts here, and I think we are finally ready. So select the cylinder, shift select the cube, Ctrl plus this time in order to have this Boolean operation, but we want to apply directly. And at this point I think we can get rid of this. So now, as we did before, let's try first M merged by distance. We can see that Blender welded 3 vertices. That probably was very close. We have some issues here, but once again it's just a matter of clicking on this auto smooth option, and in order to have some nice beveling effect, let's add the modifier, and we can add some loop cuts. And under this shading, I think we can choose harden normals. Okay, let's say that we are happy with this, and before we continue we want to delete these side faces that are facing the x-axis. That's X, delete. We can now unhide the first collection, select the path object, duplicate it, and move on the second collection. We want to have some kind of reflection of the first one, so we want to scale this object on the z-axis. So let's change the transformation pivot point option to 3D cursor, and we can scale -1 on the z-axis. Let's hide once again the first collection, and we are now once again ready to do the same process that we have done with the first object. So let's add an array modifier, -1. Let's add a bunch of copies. Let's check the merge option. We want the bevel to be last, I guess, not very sure about this. And then deform curve modifier, select curve path object. And once again it went to the opposite side. So let's move it on the x-axis. We want also this object to face upward, not in this direction. We can fix this entering edit mode and simply rotate on the x 180 degrees. And now we have it in the right place. Okay, let me quickly decrease the number of copies to maybe 4 for this and 4 also for this one. Now, in order to move around this object, we can't just move its curve, otherwise we get this strange behavior. Instead, we want first to parent this object to the curve. Let's do this also for the first one. Now, if I try moving in the same way, you can see that the object is following nicely. So let's give this a name, strip bottom, and this is strip above. I want to align these two objects and have them in the right place, something like this. I want to edit a little bit this mesh. I want this to be more on the same level of the hole here. So let's go into edit mode, but I want to be in the right position while I'm working, so I can leave the array modifier in this way, but in the curve modifier I can check these two icons here. So in the edit mode it will snap back to the deformed version. So let's select all these faces here. Let's change this back to medium point, G and Z to move this a little bit up, something like this, I think is enough. And now we have our two objects aligned together. Okay, let's start animate this thing. So I have this object that's for some reason outside of this collection. Let's fix this. And we can create another collection. We can call this camera. And in this third collection, I will create a new camera object. Let me also enlarge this window with the graph editor that you can get from this menu here. And also I will create another window here. Pressing 0 on the numpad, I will enter the camera view. And here in this view property page, I can lock the camera to the visualization, so now I can easily move around and choose my angle, something like this. In this camera property page, I can increase the passepartout level, so I won't see anything outside the camera field. Okay, of course, I want to get rid of that empty space here, so let's select both of our object, G and X, to go back. And I can feel that the feedback is quite heavy. That's probably because these objects are quite dense in topology, but let me try, in order to increase the performance, to disable the bevel modifier on the viewport. Okay, let's move backward a little bit, something like this, and in top orthographic view, and we can switch to wireframe, G and X. And what I want to do is to have this cylinder precisely centered on the 3D cursor position, so that I know that's perfectly aligned. At the first frame of my animation, I can insert a single keyframe for the X location on both of my objects. Now shift select both of them again, and I can frame. You can see here on the graph editor the properties that we are animating now, the X location for both of them. And because I now want this animation to be slow and calm, I want to have at least 50 frames, more or less 2 seconds of animation between the passing between this part to the second part. And what we need to do now is just to go back to the wireframe visualization. We can also maximize our top orthographic view. Press G and X once again and slowly move our object in place, and now just insert a second keyframe for our X location. So if we now frame on the graph editor our function curves, we see that we have this Bezier interpolation that we don't want to have, because this is the kind of animation that can go on forever, and this means it has some kind of constant acceleration, constant velocity. So pressing T, we want to switch from Bezier to linear, and we can also now change the end frame of our scene to 50 frames. Let me also uncheck this option. I really like to have my camera view clear of all these visualization cues that I don't need. And let's now add some copies for both of our deformed objects. And now if we play the animation, we start to have a loop, but this loop is not perfect because the first and last frame of our scene are just the same, so Blender is repeating this frame twice, and we want to enter 49, 1 frame less. So now we have a perfectly seamless animation going on here that can continue forever. I know, guys, that I was supposed also to show you how to animate the bouncing ball along the path and the simple shape animation that I made for the impact area on this strip, but this video took longer than I expected, so I think I will stop here. I hope you guys enjoyed this video so far, and if so, please leave a like or a comment, or if you didn't do it yet, subscribe to my channel. As always, thanks so much for watching this. I'm Stefano from SZ channel, and I'll wait you here with another great video. Ciao!